Probably this guy. I got all for those. Something I had to do on this one.
Turn them on, you hold the mute button.
Pull it up on there. I'll turn this off then.
Yeah, it's definitely got the mic on again. Come on.
All right, being that it's after 9, it's 9:03. We'll call the meeting of the Thursday, July 1, 2021 Marathon County Infrastructure Committee meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. We'll now move on to public comment. I heard from a few people. I think we've got a few people online as well that wanted to provide public comment. We'll have the mic set up. Where do we want people to come to, Jim? We'll have people come up to the front. All right, so anybody that wants to provide public comment, please come forward at this time. Please state your name and address for the record.
Judy Pagerzinski.
Well, wait till you get up to the mic.
I'm
Yep.
sorry, I should know the routine by now. Good morning. Judy Pagerzinski, address 226690 Blue Jay Lane, Ringo, Wisconsin. I am president of the Rural Riders ATV UTV Club. I don't have a whole lot this morning other than the maps that you guys post online. It's nice to have the map there to show the availability of which sections we do have currently open, other than the fact that they are extremely hard to read. I think it would be beneficial if the highlighted sections were a different color than the pale purple, because you can't see it unless you really concentrate on it. And it gets confusing for everybody, riders, officers, everything. I mean, it needs to have something that kind of like, bleh, you know, pops out at us. The other comment I would like to make is, I would like to see if we can't get the 750 or less ATV county use route that Mr. Griesbach had kind of designed for us open, at least on a 1-year trial. Everybody talks statistics, data. To me, you have to have something there to get the data from. Using other counties is okay because they do similar things, but it's not Marathon County. And I think we need to get Marathon County partially opened, at least the eastern side. Western side, I really don't care. I prefer eastern because that's where I live, but it really doesn't matter to me, just to get something open so we got some physical evidence to get data and statistics from. And also this past weekend, even though it was a wet weekend, we had a ride and we went to Shawano County because we can go where we want to go over there. With the riders, I would say we easily dropped between $400 and $500 in Shawano County. That was not a significant amount, but that was revenue that went to a different county, not our county. We met a lot of traffic. Anybody that we met tooted the horn, gave us the thumbs up, moved around us. We slowed down if we saw there were cars coming behind us, so they had plenty of room to go around. There were no issues whatsoever, and it was a rainy day, which made visibility even a little worse. But we all had our lights on. We had a guard in front, a guard in back, so we knew what was going on at all times with our riders. Like I said, the revenue went to another county. I don't think that's right for Marathon to not participate in the amount of revenue that we as riders provide with registration, gas tax, the food and stops that we make. It's just a lot of money that's not coming into our county. So that's my comment for today. Thank you much.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Do we have anybody else wishing to give public comment? All right.
Good morning. My name is Dennis Gillingham. I live in Rib Mountain. It's 146741 County Road NN. What I have is to change the speed limit out there from 55 to 45. It's about a mile, a little over a mile. It's from Whippoorwill to Greenhouse Road right there. There's a lot of residents through there and stuff like that. And the reason why is there's two dips in the road right there in the hollow. When you pull out, there's a lot of cars going 60 miles an hour plus and stuff like that. Kids are out there. My grandkids are out, you know, come and visit and stuff. And there's a dip on both sides and stuff like that. Getting mail, bikers, walkers, you know, and stuff. I do have a petition that I had probably over 90% of the people. One of the pages were missed on your thing. If you want copies of that, you know, of it, it didn't show up in your file and stuff like that. And they were all for it and stuff. No arguments. I'll sign it right now and stuff like that. So hopefully you guys approve that, and we'll all be happy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does anybody else in the meeting room wish to give public comment? Seeing none, do we have anybody that is joining us on WebEx that wishes to give public comment? Hearing nobody identify themselves, we're going to move on to item 3 on the agenda, approval of the minutes of the June 3rd, 2021 Infrastructure Committee meeting. What is your pleasure? We have a motion by Robinson, a second by Seiler. Any comments or clarifications? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, the minutes from the June 3rd, 2021 Infrastructure Committee meeting are approved. Moving on to item 4, policy issues, discussion, potential committee termination. Item A, sewer, water, trail easement to Captain Phillips. Commissioner Griesbach, are you going to take that?
Yes, I will. Keith Donner is also online from the Village of Weston. We had a request from the Village of Weston. There is a residential subdivision it's on an 80-acre parcel with about 83 single-unit homes and 12 duplex homes. Going to be in the area of, if you look at the screen, this area right here, where these two lots are, these two 40-acre lots. This little blue section through here is where they are requesting an easement to tie into the sewer under Highway X. And then also they will make a trail connecting the subdivision to the trail that's running along parallel to Highway X. Again, it's an easement going through those. That is pretty much some wetlands through that area. So their request today is a utility and pedestrian trail easement for that area. I also have another attachment just kind of showing you. Another one, Exhibit A. In your packet, Exhibit A would actually show the easement itself. It's a 60-foot easement through there. Anyway, it's a 60-foot easement by about, if I can find it here, about 170 feet long, I believe that easement would be. It would tie in the subdivision to the sewer on Highway X. I know there is a time crunch we have on this because they are beginning the, there it is. Did you see that? They're beginning the construction next week, I believe, July 7th, I believe, that they're gonna start tying into that storm sewer, so. I know there was some discussion, I possibly believe on this, so I will open it up to the committee at this point.
Supervisor Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The easement renders our property useless for all practical purposes, and I don't know that we have any, it's a remnant parcel, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't sell that parcel to the village. A 60-foot easement for utilities and a trail is excessive in that area, and if they desire that, then perhaps we should sell the property to them. I'm also troubled by the terms of the agreement that one of the provisions says that the village shall not be held responsible for any and all reasonable damage caused by the village to grantor's property not allowed to be within the easement. I don't know why we would ever agree to letting them damage our property without having any responsibility. So for that reasonable damage, I think that they should restore and hold us harmless. My first point is that this seems to be surplus and remnant parcel. Can we sell it versus the easement? And then if not, it does render that property pretty much useless for future sale.
Supervisor Christensen?
I help him hold the mute button. Hold the mute button.
Okay, I have to agree with Supervisor Robinson.
Oh, I don't think that, you're still not on there.
Can you hear me? Okay. I have to agree with Supervisor Robinson, but how many acres or how much land is there?
80 acres.
80 acres?
80 acres that the subdivision's going on. What we have, I don't have those numbers in front of me, an acreage in there somewhere.
Okay, it don't look like very much land there, but I would say we should just dispose of that along with that easement then. Can I make a motion on that, or is that proper?
Well, I think there's a lot of details that would have to be decided on that in terms of the terms of that sale yet, I believe, right?
Yeah, Keith, again, Keith Donner from the Village of Weston is online, and he may have, if he wants to comment on what the village thoughts are on that purchase.
Mr. Donner, do you have any comments that you'd like to provide?
Yes, if I may. Okay, so this parcel, and I think any other parcels that the county may have down that way, have, I think, a high percentage of wetland. That's one reason that you see some kind of a odd routing for the water or sewer connection that's being made or proposed to be made in there. The other issue is that as we were doing the planning with the developer here, contacted the Marathon County Highway Department, we were directed that we needed to make this connection, or this connection needed to be made before the 12th of July due to a maintenance, or I should say a construction project, repaving project that's planned for County Trunk X. So we're certainly not opposed to acquiring the property. That could certainly be something that we would do. I guess one thing to maybe throw on the table would be that we've also been talking about some intersection improvements at the corner of Ross Avenue and X, in the vicinity where we're going to be constructing our new municipal facility, and there would be an expectation of needing more right-of-way for the county trunk highway. So I guess we'd be open to perhaps a trade, depending on valuation of the parcels, or if you're just willing to do a trade on that, certainly we'd be open to that as an option.
Thank you. And it sounds like there's a timing constraint to this as well that I don't think we'd be able to get figured out between some of the deadlines I'm hearing. Is it perhaps in our best interest to move forward with the easement at this point and then circle back with a sale in the coming months? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Are you asking me or?
Sorry, that's a
or
question
Jim?
for staff here.
Keith, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, it's your project. I mean, if you could stub that out, I don't know when they want to tie that in, but I know we could stub that out at some point, or we could, you know, as Randy mentioned, sign the easement today and just work through an agreement later on.
Yeah, I'd certainly be open to that, agreeable to that. I think our plan is that, assuming we would have this approved to go ahead, would be to get this work done next week. In advance, and my understanding is that the work on County X is starting on the week of the 12th.
Correct, and that's our project he's talking about, the week of the 12th. So, again, it's an open cut. We don't want to have the issue of us going out there, repaving the road, and a week later, Weston coming and doing an open cut on this.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
could I suggest perhaps a temporary easement, a 2-year easement for the purposes of advancing the project, but then putting some closure to it to sort of force the discussion relative to the transfer of the property?
I think that's reasonable. I also agree with your earlier statement about that language within the easement. Yep, go ahead, Supervisor Johnson.
Okay, there we go. My concern is, once the easement is granted, even temporary, and the work is done, where's the incentive for the village to purchase the property? They've got what they needed, unless it is written into a temporary easement that there must be an agreement reached on purchase. Otherwise, once it's in, what incentive would Weston have to purchase the property?
That's a great question. I don't know if there's a whole lot of incentive for the county to continue to hold the parcel and own the parcel either, though, at the same time.
I don't disagree with that. I had a question for Mr. Griesbach. How long is the project on Camp Phillips going to take?
The issue with this project, it's a contractor project. It's not one that we're doing, so we kind of can't deviate from the time frame. I would think that's probably, Kevin, that's probably a week in, week out issue for them to repave X, probably a week.
Yeah, that lane will be about a week. I'll give a quick little background. Is we bid that project out, told the contractor they schedule it for this summer. As they were getting us their schedule, Weston came and said, hey, we have this development, just so that you guys kind of understand how this came together. There were 2 separate projects. Jim and I looked at that and said, we're going to be replacing the surface. They're going to be disturbing that surface. So we asked them to please accelerate their connection here so that we didn't do our project, pave a road, and then the village comes in 3 weeks later and cuts our road open. So just want to give a quick little bit of background of how the acceleration of this came. But our paving project they expect to start July 12th and be done around the end of July.
So I guess a follow-up question, when did you have those discussions, and why are we just getting this at the last minute with no time? When was all of this known?
Over the past few weeks.
Okay, over the past few weeks.
Yeah, we just bid the project, got our contractor schedule in
How large of an area are they going to be disturbing?
1 lane.
No, I mean to put their easement through, to put their utilities through.
Their disturbance is they're connecting to a manhole. The manhole sewer is 16 feet deep, and it's right next to our pavement. So the only The critical connection is digging down right at that manhole, right next to where we're going to be paving the road.
So again, how big of a section of road? What, 50 feet?
Yes.
Why don't we just have them, skip do the repaving there and have them, as part of the easement, do the paving when they're done? I mean,
As far as-
I
as
guess
far
it
as-
just bothers me. It kind of rankles me that this agreement for an easement is worked out without any consultation with any government body that has the authority to enter into it. And it just seems so last minute, and here it is, here's your options, we're already planned, we're ready to go. And as Supervisor Robinson said, it eventually, or essentially renders that property useless once you grant the easement. I just wish there were sufficient time and this could have been hammered out in a better way. So I'm inclined not to grant the easement at this point. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson?
I understand Supervisor Johnson's concerns, but I also understand the need for us to partner and work collaboratively. I would therefore move that we grant a temporary easement not to exceed 2 years. And we modify the agreement deleting the last sentence in paragraph 4, and that we direct staff to engage with the Village of Weston relative to a land swap with them assuming title to this property.
We have a motion from Robinson. Is that a second from Supervisor Dickinson? All right. Any further comments, questions? Supervisor Seiler?
Yes, thank you.
Make sure you use your microphone, please.
Okay. Agree with the motion just made, Mike. And I'd like to say, first of all, I'm grateful to the staff for finding out before the project was done, and then Weston had to do theirs. So I think that advanced planning is to be commended. But my question is whether it's this particular easement or any easements past or future, is there ever just a quick review by Corp Counsel on these before they come to us? And if not, should there be?
I have to go back in my emails. I believe I sent this to Scott. Like I said, we just got it recently. Excuse me, Michael. Lance asked me the same question. I believe I did. Now I'm trying to remember in my head if I did do that before I was off. So they do go to Corp Counsel for review. And also, if I may add a quick comment, is addressing Mr. Johnson's concerns about, what do we have that make them do it? If we have a 2-year easement and it's revoked after 2 years, they're going to have a trail and a sewer on our land that's, we could do whatever we want. So I would think that would be the incentive for the Village of Weston at that point to come forward and say, we want our trail and our sewer back. So I would believe that would be incentive enough for them to work out a long-term deal at that point.
Further comments?
Yes,
Go ahead.
just to confirm, so Jim, you're saying that this is always reviewed, and if not in the future, I mean, maybe even if there's just a little note when we get something like this, so that we know that Corp Counsel has had his eyes on this, that would help us a lot. Thanks.
Supervisor Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How long is the actual construction going to take of the, that's being done by the Village of Weston? Do we know that?
Keith, could you answer that question?
Connection, if I can, the connection, as that has been estimated, would take about 3 days. Then the work within the subdivision is going to take place later this summer, early fall. I guess to kind of address a question, if I may, from earlier, the developer's engineer was working on these infrastructure plans for the development, which includes the connection to the sewer, sanitary sewer on County X, or on the right-of-way of County X. And they were in the process of putting the plans together, getting final approval from DNR. So the timing from our end had no knowledge of what was happening from the county's perspective. So we're trying to be cooperative, I guess, and I appreciate any any acknowledgement of that. And, we want to do what we can, make this work together. And, if we need to change some terms on the easement, that's fine. We're agreeable to that. We don't want that to be unreasonable terms. And I think, we have this, as I mentioned, this project out on the horizon for the intersection of County X and Ross Avenue. So just my follow-up comments on that.
Thank you. Are there any more comments from the committee? Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the temporary easement signify by saying aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. And I would ask just that once that language is amended, that we run that through Corp Council again, once that final document's put together. Thank you. All right, we are moving on to item 5, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. A, use of ATV, UTV on the county highway system. Commissioner Griesbach.
Yes, this is a continuation of the conversation we had at our last meeting. The language itself which I had sent out, the language itself in our existing ordinance, we talked to the Sheriff's Department, and we also talked to Corp Council regarding that. So if you have those documents in front of you, otherwise you can look at the screens or bringing them up. Again, just for clarification, anything in yellow is in addition to our existing ordinance. Anything in blue is an addition for the section of trails, and the green addresses the speed limit. So I'll start with the yellow additions. If you notice under 6A, the original ordinance really didn't clarify between routes and trails, with trails being in Marathon County, the Burma Trail and the Edgar Fenwood Stryford Trail. So we broke those down into 2 different categories. We added the 4 routes, and we added the whole paragraph in blue for the requirements for trails. Again, the trails, are the only 2 trails in Marathon County at this time. The trails part of the ordinance would match up to 23.33 of state statutes, and it talked about the trail riding in the state of Wisconsin. So those are uniform through the state. As far as the green section, I talked to Mitchell Fox this morning. He had put in a 30 miles an hour for posted on the roadway or whichever is less, and 35 for the trails. So I talked to, again, I talked to Ted Connect from our Sheriff's Department regarding that. I talked to Mike from Corp Council and Mitch, and we're all in agreement that that should be this 35 miles an hour for both trails and roads to keep them uniform. And again, I know as personal that I go on the UTV, I think 35 is more of a standard speed for people on the roadway. So that would clear up the existing ordinance that we had talked about. Again, if you go down a little bit farther, again, it talks about operator requirements for trails. Again, the ordinance prior to did not really separate the differential between trails and routes. And this kind of cleans up that language that's in there right now. Again, talking to Ted again from the Sheriff's Department, he thought everything looked good in this ordinance except under the speed limit section, that we should have both 35 miles an hour for speed limits on both roads and trails.
Thank you, and I agree with that. I think based on what's out there currently, I think it would complicate things to have 130 and 135. And correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the ordinances that have been adopted by the towns, villages, and cities are typically 35.
Correct.
Okay. And with us making this change to it, I know the county has asked that those municipalities that adopt ATV, UTV routes within their local municipality, that it be similar or the same, so we don't have that confusion on the county roads. Correct. Is this going to cause any issues with that?
No, but believe the existing cover letter that is sent out, it says it will follow our existing ordinance. So if this is our existing ordinance, that's what it would cover. It does not specify any language in the towns. It just says that they will follow our ordinance.
Okay. Very good. So with this, we would be looking for when a motion was made, we'd be looking for an amendment to what's been presented, correct?
Correct.
All right. Questions, comments? I see Supervisor Johnson first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would move that we approve the changes with the uniform 35-mile-an-hour speed limit on the trails and routes.
We have a motion by Johnson. Do we have a second? Second by Robinson. Moving on to discussion, we'll start with Supervisor Christensen, then we'll go to Seiler.
Yes, I would like to make an amendment to that. If we could open the county roads up for roads that are less than 750 vehicles per day to ATV trails for the eastern side of the county. It would probably have to go to both sides of the county, I imagine, to make it even, I guess, or is that a proper amendment or a motion that I can make at this time?
I don't know that that's part of the ordinance that we have in front of us. I think that might be a different policy discussion. Is that right, Jim?
Correct, that's more of the operational side. This is the ordinance itself.
Yeah, so we can have a discussion about that after we get through this ordinance. So if you could hold on to that, please.
Mr. Chair?
Let's go to Supervisor Seiler.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to clarify something that Jim had said about the towns. So when you talk about the towns, is it the towns that have adopted the county ordinances, or does that include the towns that have their own ordinances?
It's a combination of both. Some towns are not adopting our county ordinance, so they have their own ordinance. The towns that have adopted our ordinance would automatically reflect the changes made today.
Okay, and so those towns that have their own ordinance, I mean, this discussion has nothing to do with that because they are distinctly different.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Johnson?
With a clarification on that, the only thing would be the Burma Trail and the Edward Fenwood Trail, because it talks about those trails, so.
Okay. Just because.
All right, Supervisor
All right.
Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted, as a point of order, to say that in order to open up new sections with the 750 units or cars per day thing, we would have to have that agendized to comply with open meetings law, because that's nowhere in the agenda today. So I would suggest it's put on the agenda so we can take action next month. So for next month's meeting, I don't think we could do it right now. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson?
I'm just looking for clarification as to what the intent of the motion. Is it to, under C3(1), just amending that to 35 miles an hour, or are we combining C3(1) and 2 in making routes and trails having a single speed limit?
My takeaway would be that we're just amending where it says 30 to 35.
So it's C3(1) would be 35.
Correct.
Okay. And just for clarification too, my understanding is that the Sheriff's Department is enforcing the ATV ordinance in towns that adopt the county's ordinance. And for those towns that choose to have their own, the Sheriff's Department is not enforcing the ATV ordinance in those towns, to bring some uniformity so that they understand what the ordinances are, so we have a more uniform approach. So for those that mirror the counties, the county Sheriff's Department would be, again, enforcing the county's code, one code in those communities.
All right. Just let me go to Jamie on WebEx. You had something you wanted to say?
Yes, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to just touch on one thing really quick, that I just got a call from Michael Van Offeren, which is one of our recreation deputies. One of the other things that with the speed limits is we are in agreement with the 35. He thought though that, so this has moved kind of quickly when we propose these changes. So one of the things that came up, I guess, in their discussions with the sheriff's department is they would like to remove that whichever is less under that speed limit 1 and 2, and rather change that to unless posted otherwise, or something along that line that would say that they have the ability to post it differently than the 35 if they feel from the sheriff's department that it warrants that. So that whichever is less is something that he wanted us to address and change to allow us more flexibility.
Would there be a scenario where we would be posting it in excess of 35 under that scenario?
Well, that's what he was saying, that it's a possibility, probably not, like in our Burma Forest unit because of just the way the trails are. But it could potentially be that we construct a different trail someday that, is wider, open, and more straight. Even the Edgar Fenwood Trail could potentially be a little bit higher if they warrant it. Or, there could be sections where they want it lower because of dangerous curves or situations. But that would give them the flexibility to go either direction. Right now, it looks like they could only go 35 as the max and then only less than that.
What are the thoughts of the committee? Supervisor Robinson?
Where's the statutory authority to raise the limit? So, you're creating an ordinance which is an absolute. And is there a process by which a party, and who is that party, is that decision subject to review? I think you get into lots of issues when you start bending the ordinance without a process and procedure in place. So while I understand that point, I think that requires a lot more thought as to how we go about that. Are we leaving that to the policies and procedures? Are you leaving it to the highway commissioner and the sheriff's department to make that decision? How are we arriving at that? And I think that needs some more thought. What we're doing with this is capping the speed limit and allowing, even though whichever is less is still, you need a process for determining that, and I assume that would be a safety concern. But we would need a policy and procedure to make that determination, particularly if we're trying to enforce it and somebody were to challenge that ticket.
Supervisor Dickinson?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just like we see with our roads here, we have people petitioning to change speed limits and such. So if there was going to be new construction or some change to Edgar Fenwood or whatever, I don't see why it shouldn't come back to this group to make that decision the way we've been doing it. The other comment I was going to say about the motion for the speed limit, I do think uniformity is important. Enforcement is the particular reason for that. When you start changing that limit, 30, 35, 25, it does bring confusion to the drivers, can cause safety issues with them, and then the enforcement for our officers. Thank you.
Welcome. Supervisor Christensen?
Yes, I've done a lot of trail riding, and up north there, I've never seen a posted speed limit on a trail. They're always on a road, but you got to use your brains on the trail. I don't know how we can even enforce something like that on the trail, but I would say capping at 35 is just fine. I've never seen anybody hardly ever go over 35.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor? That being to, would be, just a point of clarification, are we approving this or would this be passed on to the county board? It would be passed on to the county board. All right. So this would be a recommendation. And recommendation to approve what we have in front of us presented in the packet with the amendment that in C3.1, it would say 35 miles per hour instead of 30. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. All right, that will move on to the county board. On to item 5B.
Chairman?
Yep.
So I think Supervisor Christensen had said we want to discuss a little bit more about ATV and UTV in general. I would disagree with Supervisor Johnson in that regard, in that the way it's posted on the agenda just talks about the policy in general, the statute and ordinances, and I think we can have discussion about the other thoughts about opening up roads and such.
Yeah, I agree. It's the way it's agendized, it's rather generic. I wouldn't be comfortable making a motion and taking any action on increasing our routes at this meeting, but if we want to have further discussion, if we have anything that we would like to have staff prepare for our future discussions, I'm okay with having that discussion.
Okay, I just make sure that it comes up on the next meeting then, next month?
Yep.
That
Yeah, we can make that
We
happen.
can discuss it and do one way or another.
Is there any information that the committee is looking for to be prepared for that discussion?
I don't think so at this time.
You're happy with the maps that were prepared last meeting and having those in the packet?
Yes.
I think those are helpful in visualizing what routes, and if we're gonna go the traffic route, that creates a good picture.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Supervisor Dickinson.
So I did have some comments just about what's being discussed with the ATV policy. So I have spoken with the police chief of Stratford. I've spoken with the ATV group in Eau Plaine, the Eau Plaine Riders. I've spoken with the president of the town of Frankfurt. I reached out to some folks and they did respond. So I wanted to share some of the thoughts that they have about this. So it's not just the eastern side. I think the western side of Marathon County matters in this regard. Looking at the maps with the road usage, I think it's problematic to start dividing by 500 or 750 or 1,000 or 1,250. And the reason gets into enforcement, gets into these questions. The police chief of Stratford did say that anything that we would do, he thinks it should be easily enforceable. And the more we start splitting out segment upon segment upon segment like this across a wider area of the county, that can be problematic. Another thing that was brought up is hours of operation. So we have I believe it's 1 hour dusk to dawn, particularly in the wintertime. So in the wintertime, it's dark pretty early. So you really are restricting, and in the morning as well, you're really restricting usage in the wintertime. So I do think there's as it was explained to me, opening up those hours of operation would be important, whether it be a time limit, maybe at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock or something like that, something more consistent, I think would be something to consider. It was also brought up the possibility when we talk about cost, there was a thought that perhaps the groups could pay a certain fee to help with the signage costs, whether it be a registration fee, a temporary registration fee, unlike the wheel tax that we have in Marathon County, which is now permanent, that maybe until a certain amount is reached, 10,000 or 20,000 or something like that, that we then remove that. So I thought that was good. A couple groups have brought that up, that they would be willing to assist with some of the cost of signage. I have something else I did was the question of safety, okay? And I brought this up at the last meeting, and Lieutenant Connect gave us some good information and showed us the maps and that. So if you actually, and I have a chart of this, I didn't share it with anyone, but if you take all the dots of all the accidents, the 2,400 accidents in I believe it was 2019 in Marathon County, and then you start drawing the places where ATVs would not be, or UTVs would not be used, particularly state and federal roads, 153, 107, 13, 29, 39, 51, 97, and you take out those populated areas around those, particularly Wausau, Weston, et cetera, you are taking out, my estimation, probably 2/3 to 3/4 of all the accidents. So really what we're talking about when we get into the rural areas about safety are roads that simply are not driven anywhere near the other roads or at the speeds that they're driven. So I do think that we have the ability to open up these county roads and do it safely. We're not going to protect everyone. We don't do that with snowmobiles, motorcycles, bicycles, whatever else people take on the roads. And it isn't completely our responsibility to make sure everybody's safe. People have to be responsible. That's why they get licenses and why they register and such. So I am of the mindset that we would open up as many county roads as possible. Part of that discussion would be what the local municipalities can restrict as they want. I believe that is correct. And we have some already that are doing that right now that don't have access. So we wouldn't be affecting those local communities that don't want it, but we would be allowing those other communities that do want it to let people connect. And that's really what people are looking for. I don't think they're looking at getting on, County Highway M and just, going from Marshfield up to the town of Cleveland. I don't think that's what people are doing. I think what they're looking at doing is, I want to get from, somewhere in Cleveland, and I want to go a little further south into Stratford, and there are roads that are dead-end roads on the local roads that they need county roads to connect. I do have some questions, and I don't know the answers to this, and it would be for next meeting, maybe. How many counties are opened up in Wisconsin? I think would be good. I'm sure I could dig it up, but I don't know that answer right now. What kind of accidents do those counties report with ATVs? How many ATVs are registered in the county? And then I'm not quite sure, I didn't look this up as well, and what is the state laws regarding ATVs usage? I don't, that's just a broad question. I guess I could look it up, but if someone could go ahead and give us a little bit of information. So I hope that makes sense. I didn't mean to speak too long on that, but there is support for this, and I think it's our responsibility to listen to the citizens. Thanks.
Just to follow up on one thing, if you look in the ordinance that we approved recently, if you follow some of the citations in there, that'll lead you to what's in state statutes there. It looks like chapter 23. 2333. Thank you. You're welcome. Any other comments on this? Otherwise, we'll follow up with this discussion next month. Seeing none, we'll move on. Item 5B, request for speed limit reduction on County NN from Red Wing Road to Greenhouse Road. Commissioner Griesbach.
Yes, I'd like to handle this by saying Kevin's up.
All right. We received a request from Ramon to take a look at that speed limit on Double N. It's about a 1.2, 1.3 mile section. We did do we put a traffic counter out there which evaluates volumes and speeds. What we look at in speed limits, you look at access spacing, you look at road use, and you look at largely the traffic data to see what the drivers are doing. The logic is most drivers will drive at a speed that is prudent for the road. What we found out there, kind of had in my memo to Jim, the average speed out there is about 55 miles an hour. The 85th percentile speed is a speed that 85% of the cars are driving at or below. And that is in state guidance for speed limits. You look at that speed and you set your speed limit, it's typically about 5 miles an hour less than that is what you set it at, because most people drive about 5 miles an hour over a speed limit. So that in doing that, you're catching all of the people that are typically law-abiding and decent citizens driving out on the roads. Those other 15% are what should be subject to law enforcement to go out there and do law enforcement on and ticketing. So I also looked at the crashes out there. The crash rate for a 2-lane rural road in Wisconsin is about 105 crashes per 100 million vehicle miles. So you take a bunch of data and you figure out, to get consistent, for every 100 million vehicle miles traveled, you get 105 crashes. That segment had 6 crashes over a 5-year study period, which got it up to like 170. But in looking at that data, one of them was a dog that ran out in front of a car. Another one was we had a culvert failure that resulted in a damage to a vehicle, which in my 15 years with the county, that's the one time that that's happened. So I didn't contribute that to the road. And then another one was you typically cut out deer hits when you look at that. And one of the other crashes was a vehicle that went in the ditch to avoid a deer. The other crashes were on the curves over by the greenhouse, and 2 of them were ice conditions, and 1 was a fatality, and it was alcohol and drugs. So crash data, the data from that supported that the 55 mile an hour is working out there. The residents did have some concerns about delay on that. I think I had a note in there too. Delay is kind of a funny thing in central Wisconsin. If you have to wait at a stop sign for 30 seconds, that's a really long time. In the world of traffic, you usually wait till you're up over a minute or more on a regular basis before you start impacting the main road. So if we have 1,600 cars a day traveling on here, you don't put up a four-way stop for 100 cars coming off on a side street because in the peak hour morning, they have delay on it. It's kind of a balance thing there. Spacing wise out there, if the residential area was butting right up to the other residential areas, this would probably be an easy decision. But as it sits right now in that 1.2 mile section, there's a quarter mile right in the middle where that residential development occurred. There's houses that access it, and then the dead end road that goes off to the south, which is a cul-de-sac with other houses. But then the half mile west and east of it are largely undeveloped and typical 55-mile-an-hour road. So Mr. Robinson asked me if I had a conclusion in here, and I kind of left it wide open so there'd be some discussion. I wanted to present the facts and the data that I found on it, because largely that quarter mile residential section area, you could look at that and look at lowering the speed limit. I think you'll have a tough time with compliance on it. I think people are going to hit those rural areas and drive at a speed that they feel is prudent. The plus side with lowering a speed limit is if you do have a crash, it's typically less severe. People have more reaction time. The downside with lowering a speed limit in an area that doesn't feel like a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit to drivers is you'll end up with higher speed differential. I think you'll still get those 65-mile-an-hour cars through there, and especially during those morning times when everybody is trying to get out there and commuting into work. So you can introduce a risk sometime in that you get speed differential. You'll get people who are used to seeing, okay, if there's nobody at that guardrail, I can pull out here. And now when the car comes through doing 65 miles an hour, it becomes a hazard. And they did also comment on passing on the hill. If with a lower speed limit, I think initially at first you'd probably actually get more of that as you still get some of those drivers. So there's pros and cons to both sides of this. Largely, this is kind of a balance of lowering the speed limit for the residents there or maintaining a 55 for mobility on the county highway. And the data, to be honest, is kind of right in the middle of it. So I guess I'll leave it up for you guys for some questions and discussion.
All right, first off, I want to thank the residents that submitted the petition for coming forward with this. And I want to thank staff for putting together that report. I think that report is great. It really gives us great insight to what's going on out there. It matches the numbers, so thank you for that. Any questions, comments? Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the written report, it says that if this change was made, it would result in an additional 14 seconds of travel time if you're traveling through that section. I look at that and I look at that it's the township making this request. They're in favor of it. Their residents are in favor of it. I don't see a problem with granting it, and I think the argument that if we lower the speed limit, we're going to have riskier behavior because people aren't following it, I think that would wane with time as people get used to. That's 45 there. There are numerous other portions of county roads in this county where speed limits drop significantly based on local factors. I mean, real local factors, whether it's a curve, whether it's vehicles entering or leaving the roadway. So I think I don't see great harm in granting this request and lowering the speed limit on that section. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Supervisor Christensen.
Yes, is this 45, is that a continuation of another 45, or is it 35 before that, or is it 55 before that?
To the west, it's all 55, and the east limits of this request is where the 45 currently begins.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you look, I think that second aerial exhibit shows Red Wing Road, shows to the north there. That's where the split is now. And you can see the State Park Speedway, the racetrack, that's at the end of the 45. You can see it's a little bit, it's more dense residential to the east of this than it is to the west. which is the reasoning for that transition.
Further questions, comments? I guess I'll share my thoughts on this. Like I said, I really appreciate the report on this, and I think it's really beneficial in looking at it. I've seen in many situations where there is a request from local residents to reduce the speed of the road, and sometimes that can have the opposite effect that is desired, in that you simply create an area where there's more passing because people believe that based on the road design that they can travel that speed. I've seen roads that should probably be 55 that are 35, and some people that follow the 35 are quickly passed by people driving 45, 50. At the same time, I think that we need to recognize the request from the town, and I'm typically in favor of local control over those type of things, as they have the residents and they have the local knowledge of what's happening in that area. So does anybody want to make a motion? Supervisor Johnson?
Move to adopt the change in speed limit during or on the enumerated stretch from 55 to 45.
We have a motion from Johnson, second from Seiler. Any further questions, comments? Supervisor Dickinson?
Is there a possibility of putting up signage indicating the speed change, a flashing sign, going from 55 now to 45, moving that back? Does that help at all, or any kind of, indicator? Just throwing it out there, whether we do it or not.
We have used the sheriff's department to put out the, your speed is, and it generally helps when they're doing that. We don't have any of those permanently. You see, I know when you go into Edgar, for example, they have your speed is. We do not have any of those permanently out, but we do borrow them from the sheriff's department. Usually that's our first attempt when somebody comes toward us with a request, or they're saying people are flying past my house. We'll contact the sheriff's department and they'll move their trailer out there. So we do that. We have nothing permanently marked like that.
I'm in favor of this. I think the interesting part is all you're really doing, you're just extending that out another mile or so when they already know that they're going to be slowing down. They already know it's coming up to 45 and 35 further down on the east side of the road. So I appreciate the community members in the town making the request.
Mr. Klein? Mr. Turner? You want to get a microphone in front of you, sir?
Yes, we have a couple mobile radar signs.
Scott, could you introduce yourself and give your
Scott
title?
Turner, yes, Scott Turner with the Town of Red Mountain. I'm the Street and Park Superintendent. We have a couple mobile radar signs that fixed to just a bracket that we typically put right below a speed limit sign that does collect data as well, and it just indicates your current speed and flashes if it's over typically 5 miles an hour is where we set it at. So we put those around town randomly, just moving them around with those detachable brackets. So we'd be more than willing to put that out on the highway with the county highway's permission.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the speed limit change signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, that has passed. We are on to item 6, educational presentations, committee discussion. Airport update. Brian, are you on the WebEx?
I am. Thank you, Chair Pfeiffer. With your permission, I'll share my screen. I've got a short presentation prepared.
Please do.
Share. And are you seeing the full screen or the notes version?
Believe we got you. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for giving me the time. Today I've got a relatively short presentation prepared by way of update for the Infrastructure Committee. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions, but I want to be respectful of your time as well. you go. So really three big topics: the construction, air service coming out of the pandemic, and marketing 2021. So first item is construction. We have a lot going on at the airport this year. Very exciting time. First, the biggest and the most noticeable project we have is the reconstruction of runway 1735. That is our north-south runway. If you've traveled down 3951 in the last few months, you'll see a lot of construction going on. By way of scope, it is a complete reconstruction of our secondary runway. And I say secondary runway because that is a significant designation that we obtained a few years ago. Without the designation of secondary, and secondary essentially means it has significant usage. It would have to be a traditional crosswind runway, which when looking for funding for the project, it would probably be limited to a much shorter runway. So this is a full 6,500 feet long, same length as it was before, can support all of the commercial and charter aircraft flying that we see. In all, it is just over $14 million worth of construction. It began March 1st of this year and on track to finish on or before the end of October. Funding came from the FAA. In addition to the reconstruction project, we are putting in LED lights on the runways and on this runway and supporting taxiways, and also installing the electrical infrastructure to support all LED lights on the airfield moving forward in probably less than 3 years. So we're very excited about that. And the last thing I'll say on that is a couple really good contractors. One Treeweiler out of Marshfield have been doing a nice job. I was slightly concerned when we got the bid prices, significantly lower than some of the other bids, but they're producing a very nice product for a good price. So good team. Second item is taxi lane echo and flight line drive reconstruction. If you look in the, I'd say, bottom right picture, you can see the paved area that is parallel to the taxiway. So you see the runway on the right. The next parallel taxiway is taxiway Charlie. And then to the left of that is Echo. That is an asphalt area that supports general aviation development, general aviation use of the airfield. That was originally paved, I want to say over 30 years ago. I forget the exact date, but at the end of its useful life, and a good opportunity to reconstruct it now because we are seeing significant development in that area, which is the next item. But before we get into that project was just awarded this week. So construction will hopefully start mid-July, mid to late July, and will be completed before November, I believe, is the estimated time at this point. Also funded by the FAA. The last item is new hangar construction. So that is the map you see. That's kind of the wallpaper for this slide. Moving from left to right, you see Spirit Hangar constructed in 2020. So it's an older database we're using. That hangar is a medevac hangar, was completed and now operational. Great to have those partners on the airport. And for about a month now, the Odyssey Aviation hangar that you see highlighted in blue in the center of the screen is under construction. And that is anticipated to be operational before this fall. So another factor driving the taxi lane reconstruction and flight line drive. I forgot to mention that. That is the road, the access road leading to that development area. So the road you see just to the north of the blue box. So yeah, a lot going on in terms of construction, but good timing for this. And so far the projects have been doing extremely well. So what's driving the construction? Air service. We'll transition to the next slide. I just took a snapshot of today's schedule. So this is today, July 1st, 2021. You can see we have 11 daily flights. So 22 operations, 11 flights coming and 11 flights going with service on American, Delta, and United. To put that in perspective, a month ago, June 1st, we were 8 daily flights. 2 months ago, May 1st, we were 6 daily flights. And 1 year ago, in the height of the pandemic, 1 daily flight, July 1st, 2020. So it's great to see this return. This is the full pre-COVID schedule in terms of overall numbers. Delta is up 1 with 6 daily flights. United is down 1 with 2 daily flights, but overall we're right at that pre-COVID level, which is exciting to see. Seeing a lot more travelers, a lot more leisure travelers than we had even before the pandemic, and that's largely a result of great airline prices. So as these flights are increasing, it's my job to help fill those for the airlines, and that transitions us into marketing. This marketing program, the Seaways marketing program, was completely revamped in 2021. Supervisor Dickinson was very involved in that process, and with an effort on digital marketing. So early in the year, you see on the bottom right-hand corner, just the picture of the plane and the sunset. We were very cautious not to overly advertise. We didn't want to get out due to some of the sensitivities, the obvious sensitivities, and advertise to people that we're not flying, we're not ready to travel. On the other hand, there were people that needed to travel for fill in the blank reason, but truly needed to travel, and we wanted to make sure that they considered Central Wisconsin Airport as an option. So that's why we put this digital first methodology in place, where through the sciences that I don't pretend to understand of social media and digital behavior, we were able to identify people in our catchment area that were traveling and serve them messages for Central Wisconsin Airport. As we're coming out of the pandemic, we've broadened it slightly to market towards the leisure traveler. I think that's some of our biggest opportunity, as business travel hasn't completely recovered yet. And that's where you can see some of the brighter slides. We know through data in the US, this isn't unique to Central Wisconsin, but the most popular destination are beaches and mountains. So we wanted to have that in the front of our advertising. As you'll see now, and going forward, we have started going into more of the traditional marketing as well, because we feel that's important, but it is still a digital first campaign. I'll give you a couple of examples that you'll see throughout the community.
Tonight's CBS Primetime lineup is sponsored by Central Wisconsin Airport. Your journey begins here. Now offering more flights and better prices. Fly Seaway, the better way to travel.
Did you hear that? Yes. Okay, good. So that's our traditional television, Channel 7 sponsored advertisement. I think the next one that'll pop when I hit the button is a radio advertisement.
Weather brought to you by Central Wisconsin Airport, now offering more flights and better prices. Fly Seaway, the better way to travel. Your journey begins here.
And then the last one is YouTube marketing. So this isn't our YouTube channel. It's if you met some of those target behaviors, and you're watching YouTube for whatever, youth sports, you name it. The advertisements that pop up prior to what you watch, what you really are trying to see. So that is this one. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Whether your happy place is at the beach, on a mountain, or reuniting with loved ones, Central Wisconsin Airport wants to help you get there. Now more than ever, enjoy the conveniences of flying local. Skip a long drive. Get to your gate in minutes, not hours. And save money for things that matter the most, like making new memories. Now offering more flights and better prices. Your journey begins here. Fly Seaway, the better way to travel.
All right, and also on the screen, you can see just some of the, these are digital messaging that pops up on various platform, social media, banner advertisements, etc. With that, I'll open it up to questions or comments from the committee.
Questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, I thank you for that, Brian. That was very informative. Sounds like you got a lot going on, and we'll probably look for an update coming up in the fall again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We're on to item 6B, broadband update. Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are exciting and interesting times. We are in the midst of a round of Public Service Commission grants for broadband expansion. There's $100 million of American Recovery Plan Act dollars that available for award. The due dates for the grant applications is July 27th. On the 14th of June, we had a meeting with the internet service providers, giving an overview of the grant and potential partnership with the county. The grant will be targeting areas that are underserved, and the threshold is 25 down and 3 megabytes per second up with wired service, which is different than what they've done in the past. I think there is an effort on the part of the state and the federal government to move more toward fiber than traditional wireless because of the reliability and speeds. But there's also a minimum of 100 down and up as the baseline for grants, unless it can't be achieved, and then it has to be scalable at some point in the future. We currently have $177,000 in our capital improvement budget for partnering with other providers. In addition, there's a potential to tap into the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, where the HR Finance Committee will be having a series of hearings beginning late this month. We'll be meeting with it at the joint meeting of the towns, and then we'll be having meetings in Edgar, Hatley, and in Wausau, seeking citizen input on how those funds should be used. But as it relates to the grant application, we've given the internet service providers until tomorrow noon to let us know if they want to partner with us relative to the grant application for the Public Service Commission. And there are additional points scored with those partnerships. We will be reaching out to the towns served by those grant applications to see if they also would be willing to partner with their dollars, again, to strengthen the application. On the 7th of July, the task force will be meeting to evaluate the proposals that we receive. We continue to look at, serving that unserved area. We continue to have concerns in the northern tier towns where Frontier's fiber or a copper wire system was, we had problems last year, and we don't have viable wireless service options right now for cell service. That's a priority, but we're also looking with the maps. And the one thing that Jerry will vouch for is that there isn't a map in existence that accurately reflects where service is in the county. The feds and the state tend to rely on if one person in a census tract has service, everybody in that census tract has service, and that's not the case. People across the street from each other may not have service. It's topographically or geography or geology challenged, and if you're living in a wooded area or a valley, so we're trying to work with that. So next week, the Broadband Task Force will be reviewing those applications, determining who we're going to partner with. At that point in time, we will know better what the expectations are from our ISP, Internet Service Provider partners, in terms of the request for the county. We will look at the KIP budget as well as other funding sources. And we'll be developing letters of support for those applications, strengthening them. And then hopefully providing that so that they can submit those grants on the 27th. Also at the meeting next week, Scott Felt, who's the county administrator from Kewaunee County, will be meeting with the Broadband Task Force. Kewaunee County went out, they developed a request for proposals to serve the county, and they invited internet service providers to give them proposals on how they would partner with the county, and they selected Bug Tussle. And they initially went with a fixed wireless, off the towers. The second stage of that process is to add additional fiber to connect to the towers to increase the speeds and reduce the latency, the difference between the upload and download speeds, and eventually to get into fiber to the home. We'd like to find out what concerns he had about the process, the benefits of the process, to see if we should go and develop requests for proposals for all of Marathon County, portions of it, but we think that there's great merit in looking at that, and we, based on where that process goes, we'll probably be coming back here and updating this committee. But there's been a lot of interest in this round of PSC grant applications. Serenity out of Whitburg Telephone Company has forwarded to us a proposal already, expanding service in the Mayflower and Pike Lake area. And I know that we have a meeting later today with another carrier, and we've had discussions with several others that are looking at some fairly large projects serving the unserved area of the county. And first of all, I'd like to thank Supervisor Dickinson because he provided us with some very good information relative to unserved areas or underserved areas. And if the rest of you have or are hearing from constituents relative to slow speeds, we'd like to know that because we will need that information as part of the grant application. All of the internet service providers are asking us for that. So we have a number of issues that lie ahead of us. What's the level of funding that the county will be committed to? We have the PSC grant application. There's no guarantee that we'll be funded, but if we are funded or if we agree to partner and they are funded, we'll have to come up with the dollars. But another issue is staffing. Melinda Osterberger, who has served us very well in her role at University Extension, is leaving that position on the 13th of July, taking a position with Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, which is great for her and great for us because she'll be working with us in a different capacity, but it creates a void. And we've been struggling internally on how to fill that void and came up with a great scenario last week that lasted until Friday afternoon. And so we're back to the drawing board. But in order to make sure that we have support in place, Jerry Klein is taking the lead on these efforts from a coordination perspective. And then we're working with Lance and his office relative to other support to make sure that we can assemble the letters of support that are critical for this grant application process. There will be discussions later today at the Extension Education Economic Development Committee on the future potential role of University Extension. Do we rely, will that community development staff position be filled? What will it do? What are the expectations? Are there other options such as working with McDevco and others? So we'll be working with them. We are starting to hear concerns relative to supply side issues. Some of the internet service providers have indicated that there's a shortage of fiber, which could delay projects. And with the PSC grant, if you have it ordered, you'll have it next year. Or you'll, they're a year out right now, and there are some concerns that may delay our ability to expand broadband as quickly as we want. We are continuing to work with both Charter Communication and LTD. They're both interested in expanding services. Those were the companies that were selected as part of the Federal Communications Rural Development Opportunities Fund to expand service to the gigabit level in rural Marathon County. We're looking to accelerate that because it could be 6 to 10 years out. So we're looking for ways to continue. We will be potentially looking to this, this committee and the county board for the direction on where we go with staffing in the future, as well as the potential level of contribution relative to our partners with the public service grant application and others going forward. So Lance or Jerry, do you want to add anything?
I have a couple things I'd like to add. The other thing that we've the mapping that John talked about is one of the things that's causing the biggest problem, in my opinion, with that is the data that they're using is vendor provided data. So, for example, about half of the county is listed by Frontier as covered in 25.3, which I'm reasonably confident is inaccurate. So that's one of the issues. What Supervisor Dickinson provided was excellent. So specific addresses of people the reason that we need that is that in order to apply for the grant, it has to be underserved or unserved. And when the whole county is listed as properly served, the only way that we're going to get any grant funding from the PSC is to specifically point out data mistakes that are out there. So that kind of data is really essential. Brown County has done something that I'm really interested in, and I've reached out to the partner that they're working on. They have provided a speed test tool that maps addresses and the specific speed at each address instead of looking at it instead of either of the two problem scenarios, which is asking the vendor for where it is or identifying one property in a census tract. And if anyone's interested, just Google for Brown County Broadband Survey, and then there's a link on there for their current map. It's an excellent tool. One of the things that the CIO at Brown County pointed out was that he's found that vendors are looking at it, and they're looking for neighborhoods where there's opportunity for business, and making decisions and extending their fiber and cable plants into areas based on the data that's in the speed test. So it's really interesting to me. I think we need to pursue that. I was on a call yesterday with the PSC, some of the PSC broadband staff, and strongly recommended that they look at that as a way to map instead of the way that they're currently mapping. And Coulter Sikorsky said that he'd be looking into it. He was really interested in it as well. I sent him a link to it. The other thing I wanted to mention is the PSC has its own broadband task force, and their report is being published today, I believe. I haven't seen it yet, but I was told it was coming out today. It came out yesterday?
I thought it was yesterday.
Okay. You may have mentioned that, so I apologize. Nope. And then they also have stood up a different task force on diversity and inclusion, and I am planning to participate in that, but I missed their first meeting. I had a conflict yesterday. And then, John, do you want to talk about potentially moving towards an RFP? Did you already do that, or do you want to talk about that at all?
That was in the context of the Scott Feld, the county administrator from Kewaunee County, coming over next week. And again, they sent out the RFP. I think they had 7 different responders and went through that selection process, and again, made a decision. That's where they would then focus their efforts. Not to say that other internet service providers could provide service, but they just, I think it's probably a preferred provider type agreement, and they support their PSC grants, and they've pulled in a couple of $1 million through that process. So we'll find out more if you're available next Thursday at 4. You're welcome to listen in, and we'll know a lot more. But I think there's a desire on the part of administration and county board leadership to try to be much more aggressive in mapping our path forward. We're concerned that the longer we wait, the more people that will be in line ahead of us, and we'll be caught in those shortages of fiber and the ability to provide services. So the request for proposals is a concept. We don't know what level of funding we would look to, and I believe in Kewaunee counties it's been a limited level of funding, but just sort of that preferred provider and support. And I think that those are the things that we would like to learn through that request for proposal process.
Questions from the committee?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, John, thank you for the report on behalf of the task force. Well done. I have a question for Jerry on the maps that you talked about that Brown County has done. Do we know what that would mean for us as a county? Because even if another state entity were to take it on, it's going to be, time before that goes out. But right now, one of our biggest struggles, as we all know, is having accurate information. So is it even feasible for our county to do something similar? Because we know getting that accurate information is really crucial to getting these grants. So what do we know about that?
I don't know much yet. I reached out to the vendor yesterday, so
Okay.
probably know something in a few days. It's a
That-
company called GeoPartners.
Okay, because that would be,
I have anecdotal information from August Neverman that they offered to sell it to the state for about $70,000, which is a drop in the bucket for really quality data.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's accurate. That was just
Okay.
secondhand information from a conversation August had with them months ago.
because it would just seem that that would be
I think
a tool.
what I'm intending
Yeah.
to do is to talk to them about where they're at, how many counties that they've
Mhm.
done. I don't really know what their footprint is, to be honest with you. I want to find out if they'd be willing to do us, to allow us to use it, find out how much that costs, and then remind them that that they need to be in conversations with the PSC as well.
Okay, that would be great. And then if I may, Mr. Chair, I have a question for Supervisor Dickinson.
Yep, go ahead.
I'd be really interested in finding out how, if you had a tool or, given your expertise with this issue, I don't have that, and I'd certainly like to check with my residents who I know are not getting the service they need. Do you have something that you could offer for the rest of us that don't have your background on what to ask and help me out here?
Sure. There were two avenues I took. One was I have a Facebook page, and I posted on there that we're looking for people who have bad internet connectivity. Friends, family, please share. They did, and like I said, within a day, I had 25 responses. And people have shared that, not just citizens, but businesses and other people in the town of Cleveland. We have several subdivisions right out there that are disconnected from landline, Frontier or anything like that. So really, they're relying upon Country Wireless. And it's not to denigrate them, they're providing a service. They simply cannot provide the speeds that people need. The other avenue I took is working where I work in the Information Systems Department at Marshfield Clinic. We are basically, the 300 or so staff are basically all working at home. We've been doing that for over a year now, and that's probably where it's going to remain. And so I did speak with one of the directors there, and I simply showed him what I had shared on Facebook, and I sent an email. He approved it. I sent an email to my coworkers, and people responded to that as well. So I didn't do anything, dramatic. I think it's just the opportunity that we should be, or we could be, I don't want to say should, that's not fair to people, but we could be using those opportunities to just reach out to people we know through social media is the easiest way, and just say, share your experience. All they need to do is just say, I have bad internet, and then say, give me your address. Because we'll submit that, and then we can do that test, and someone can tell us whether they do or not. For example, I'm in the village of Stratford, and honestly, I have 2 internet service providers because I don't want to fall into a situation for my family with school or for myself with work where we're without internet connectivity. So we have Frontier, which is 2 bonded lines. So we have 2 lines coming into the house bonded into the modem, but we're also very close to the substation. So we're getting, 25 off of that pretty consistently. And then we also have Charter Spectrum, which, some days we can get 60 and other days we get 15. And Frontier is out on Tuesday a lot. When it rains, Frontier is out. So we use Spectrum for those cases, and the kids are, kind of laugh about, well, which one should I use now? So, but we live in the village and we have that opportunity. And honestly, we even have hotspots. We rely upon our hotspot through Cricket as well. So, so I would just say ask people.
Sure.
And
Just to follow up on that, one of the things we're also looking at the Broadband Task Force is a survey of the unincorporated areas and the, we're debating the service area because there's some of the unincorporated areas, such as the village of Weston and Croninwater, which are underserved. So we're looking at doing a survey similar to what Lincoln County did to get address-specific information to help in these efforts. So we'll have more after next week's meeting.
Mr. Chair, I had one more comment, one more question, and that's, what about our businesses? I mean, McDevco, chamber, our chambers in the county. Again, I have an employer where we're going to have all these people working from home. It's in their best interest that we have good connectivity, and obviously we're talking rurally here, so that people can choose to live where they want to live and still be able to do their job. I do have several businesses that reached out. One, I have an email, which is, Rib Falls Waterjet reached out and says, trying to, multiple ways that they're trying to shoot the signal from their house to their business in order to do their job. There have got to be businesses in the county that would have high interest in this.
Let me just respond to that with, McDevco did a survey of Marathon County businesses earlier this year, and they continue to track that issue, and it is a concern. In the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership, which is affiliated but not directly connected to the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce, has made this one of their priority areas, and they have provided the task force with 2 members from their group to help us, and we have representatives from Aspirus and Greenheck on the task force they're really pushing us to move quickly, and they view it as a critical issue for recruitment, retention, and just getting work done.
Any further questions, comments on the broadband? Supervisor Seiler?
Veterinarians, because even a lot of the farmers, their equipment, precision agriculture, they need to be able to have these things connect to use them, and without that, they cannot implement the new progressive practices. So,
I can't give you the specific industries, but I know they try to reach out as broadly as they can, and I know that Jerry has been a longtime advocate for the CAFOs and others bringing that issue to the table. So we have talked about it, as you're aware, and it's been in some of our discussions with the ISPs, and but we're finding that wherever we look, we have problems.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be sure, because agriculture is still an economic engine in this county. We need to make sure that that is included. Thanks.
All right, we'll move on to item 6C, updates from the CCIT director.
I have a project update in your packet, and I don't really have anything particular to go over. I would open any questions on open projects.
Does anybody have any questions on the CCIT update? Seeing Supervisor Robinson.
I just have one relative to the whole issue of cybersecurity and ransomware. Is it possible for us at some time in the near future to get perhaps an update on where we are as a county in trying to address those issues? I know you've given us some in the past.
Sure, I'd be glad to at the upcoming upcoming committee meeting. I'd be glad to do a presentation on what the current risks are and what we've been doing so far. We've done, I can tell you that we went from an investment specific to security from about 120,000 to 270,000 in the last 15 months, and now have a staff person assigned 100% to security. Although because we've had a difficult time backfilling his position, he has only been able to spend about half time on it. But we have a person coming on board on the 7th of July, and I'm hoping that helps fix that problem.
Thank you.
Be glad to have that as an agenda item if you'd like.
Move on to item 6D, Commissioner's Report.
That was also included in your packet. Just want to highlight on one or two items. One was brought to me by Supervisor G. Mask. We're out mowing currently, and I know you guys probably get questions with the grass mowing. On the state highways, Department of Transportation only allows us to mow once a year. So that's can we kind of hold back a little bit. I know the weeds are getting tall, but we're getting a lot of questions. I'm sure you are also getting those same questions about the grass. So we kind of hold back because we mow the state and the county all together at the same time. The state only allows us to mow one pass per year. So we have to be done mowing by July 15th, which we should be this year, but we mow as late as we can. Otherwise, we run into issues in the fall with the grass being tall. So if any of your constituents ask you about that, that's the reason behind that. And then you also notice in the packet that I was appointed to another committee. I am on the board of directors now for the Transportation Development Association. Just for your ease of mind, that's only 3 or 4 meetings a year, so it's not a great time commitment, but I look forward to serving on that board.
Just a follow-up question from a discussion I know we had last year about wild parsnip. Has there been any additional issues with that this year as we're talking about roadside clearing?
On the county system, it has not been a great issue. We've had a few places that we had to go take care of it. It's becoming quite an issue in the town of Knowlton, and we've been working with Knowlton, helping them out down there on their issues.
Does anybody have any questions on the commissioner's report? Go ahead, Supervisor Christensen.
Yes. Why do you have to be done by July 15th? What was the?
That's the date. The DOT gives us each area. The state is broke down to like 4 or 5 different areas, and that's the date that one of the reasons is they don't want the grass to get too tall, and the other thing is with pollinators. Working with the DNR, they don't want us to mow in the pollination time either. So it's a combination of the two.
Okay, just wondering.
Seeing nobody else with questions, comments, we'll move on to item 7, announcements. Future meetings and agenda items. I've got 2 from today's meeting in terms of new routes, looking at the new potential routes for ATVs, UTVs on county highway system, and a presentation on cybersecurity. Anything additional? Seeing none. Our next meeting will be August 5th, 2021. Up for item 8. Motion by Dickinson, second by Christensen to adjourn. Thank you, everybody. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Have a great day.